My name is Trevor Hill, and 3 months ago I discovered that my wife was screwing her boss in hotel rooms that cost more than my monthly salary. But that's not the jaw-dropping part. The jaw-dropping part is what I did about it. I'm a paramedic in Columbus, Ohio, 29 years old, decent-looking if you squint, and stupid enough to believe that love conquers all. My wife, Paige, was a corporate recruiter at some fancy consulting firm downtown. The kind of place where they serve kombucha in the break room and everyone pretends to meditate during lunch. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The morning everything started unraveling, I was sitting in our kitchen eating cereal that had gone stale 3 days ago, watching Paige get ready for work. She was doing that thing where she applies mascara with surgical precision, like she's performing heart surgery instead of making her eyelashes look fuller. "I'm working late again tonight," she said, without looking at me. "Big client presentation." "Which client?" I asked, because I'm an idiot who still thought we had conversations. "You wouldn't know them." She grabbed her purse, a leather thing that cost more than my work boots. "Don't wait up." That was Tuesday. She'd worked late Monday too, and the Friday before that. In fact, Paige had been working late so often that I'd started having dinner conversations with our microwave. At least, it listened. My partner Jake noticed something was wrong during our shift that day. We were restocking the ambulance after a call, some college kid who thought he could drink a bottle of tequila and still function like a human being. When he looked at me with that expression people get when they're about to say something you don't want to hear. "Trevor, man, I don't know how to tell you this." "Then don't," I said, organizing bandages with unnecessary focus. "I saw Paige yesterday, at the Marriott downtown." My hands stopped moving. She had a work meeting there. With Owen McKinley? I knew that name. Owen was Paige's boss, a guy who drove a Tesla and wore watches that cost more than most people's cars. I'd met him at the company Christmas party, where he'd spent the entire evening talking about his vacation house in the Hamptons and his CrossFit routine. "Yeah, probably," I said. "Why?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "They were holding hands, Trevor, and it didn't look like business." That night, I sat in our living room waiting for Paige to come home. The house felt different somehow, like all the furniture had shifted slightly to the left. I kept checking my phone, scrolling through her social media, looking for clues I'd missed. She came home at midnight, smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "How was the presentation?" I asked. "Fine," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I'm exhausted. Going to bed." I wanted to ask her about Owen. I wanted to ask her about the hand-holding and the late nights and the way she'd been looking through me instead of at me for the past 2 months. Instead, I said, "Okay, good night." Because I'm a coward. Or I was, anyway. The next morning, Paige left early for a breakfast meeting. I had the day off, so I decided to do something I'd never done before. I followed her. I'm not proud of this. Following your wife around town isn't exactly hero behavior, but I needed to know. The not knowing was eating me alive, like some kind of parasite that fed on doubt and suspicion. I stayed 3 cars back, feeling like a character in a bad detective movie. Paige drove straight to the Marriott, parked in the garage, and walked into the lobby like she owned the place. 10 minutes later, Owen McKinley showed up in his Tesla. They met at the elevator. He kissed her. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a full-on, hands-in-her-hair, movie star kiss that made my stomach drop into my shoes. I sat in my car for an hour, staring at the hotel entrance, waiting for them to come out. They didn't. I drove home and called in sick to work, which was technically true. I was sick. Sick to my stomach, sick of being lied to, sick of being the kind of man whose wife cheats on him with her boss. That evening, Paige came home with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. "Thought we could have dinner together for once," she said, smiling like nothing had happened. We ate pad thai and spring rolls while she told me about her day. She was a good liar, I'll give her that. She had details about meetings that never happened and conversations with co-workers who probably didn't exist. She even complained about Owen, calling him demanding and difficult. "He's such a control freak," she said, twirling noodles around her fork, "always micromanaging everything." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or throw my plate against the wall. Instead, I nodded and asked if she wanted more wine. After dinner, we watched a movie. Some romantic comedy where the husband was a bumbling idiot and the wife was perfect and long-suffering. Paige fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself that I'd imagined everything. That Jake was wrong, that the kiss at the hotel was a hallucination, that my wife still loved me. Then her phone buzzed with a text message. The screen lit up just long enough for me to see the sender, Owen, and the message, "Can't stop thinking about this afternoon." That's when I stopped being a coward and started being something else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Paige, listening to her breathe, wondering how long she'd been lying to me, wondering if she'd ever actually loved me or if I'd just been convenient. A placeholder until something better came along. Owen McKinley was definitely better, at least on paper. He was 6 years older than me, made probably 3 times my salary, and had the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. He was also married, which made this whole situation even more disgusting. I'd met Owen's wife, Rebecca, at that same Christmas party. She was a pediatric surgeon, brilliant and beautiful, and completely devoted to her husband. She'd spent 20 minutes showing me pictures of their kids, twin boys who looked exactly like their father. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my buddy Marcus, who worked in IT at the hospital, and asked him for a favor. "I need you to help me track someone's phone," I said. "Dude, that's illegal." "It's my wife's phone. I pay for the plan." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You sure you want to do this, Trevor? Sometimes it's better not to know." But I already knew. I just needed proof. Marcus set me up with an app that would track Paige's location. "Just don't tell anyone where you got this," he said. "And Trevor, be careful. This kind of thing can make you crazy." He was right. Over the next week, I watched Paige's movements like a hawk. Every lunch break, every after-work drink, every client meeting was tracked and cataloged. The pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she'd go to the Marriott for 2 hours during lunch. Fridays, she'd meet Owen at a wine bar called Vintage, then disappear for the evening. Weekends, when she claimed to be shopping with her friends, she'd actually be at Owen's house while his wife was at the hospital. I started taking pictures. Not creepy stalker photos, just documentation. Paige's car in the hotel parking garage. Owen and Paige holding hands outside the wine bar. The two of them laughing together like they didn't have a care in the world. The worst part wasn't the cheating itself. It was how happy she looked. In all our recent photos together, Paige looked tired or distracted or just plain bored. But with Owen, she was radiant. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 4 years ago, except she was sharing that version of herself with someone else. On Thursday night, I decided to confront her. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say, how I was going to stay calm and rational and adult about the whole thing. I was going to give her a chance to explain, to come clean, to maybe save our marriage. That plan lasted about 30 seconds. "We need to talk," I said when she walked in the door. "Can it wait? I'm exhausted." "No, it can't wait." I pulled out my phone and showed her the tracking app. "I know about Owen." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Marriott, Vintage wine bar, his house on Saturdays when Rebecca's working." Paige stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much she could still deny. "It's not what you think," she finally said. "Really? Because I think you're screwing your married boss in hotel rooms while I'm home eating dinner alone. Trevor, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying to me for months? How you've been making me feel crazy for thinking something was wrong? How you've been coming home and kissing me with the same mouth you've been using on him? That last part was cruel, but I was past caring about being nice. Paige started crying then, but they weren't real tears. They were the kind of tears people cry when they get caught, not when they feel genuinely sorry. I never meant for this to happen, she said. It just happened. Bullshit. You don't accidentally have an affair for 3 months. You don't accidentally book hotel rooms and lie to your husband and sneak around town. You made choices, Paige. Every single day, you chose him over me. It's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple. You're married to me, and you're sleeping with him. That's about as simple as it gets. She wiped her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been pity. You don't understand. Owen and I, we have something special, something real. And what do we have? We have history, comfort. But that's not enough anymore, Trevor. I need more than that. I felt something break inside me, not my heart. That had been cracking for weeks. Something deeper. Something that had been holding me back from becoming the kind of person who could do what needed to be done. Get out, I said. What? Get out of my house, tonight. Go stay with Owen or get a hotel room or sleep in your car. I don't care. But you're not sleeping here anymore. Trevor, be reasonable. We can work this out. No, we can't, because I don't want to work it out. I want you gone. Paige packed a bag, still crying her fake tears, still trying to convince me that this was all some big misunderstanding. As she was leaving, she turned back to me. You'll regret this, she said. Owen can give me things you never could. I'm sure he can. But here's the thing, Paige. I can take things away that he never will. She didn't understand what I meant. Not yet. But she would. The next morning, I called my lawyer. His name was David Chen, and he'd handled the real estate paperwork when Paige and I bought the house. He was smart, thorough, and completely ruthless when he needed to be. I want a divorce, I told him, and I want to make sure she doesn't get a penny more than she's legally entitled to. What are the grounds? Adultery. I have proof. David was quiet for a moment. Trevor, I have to ask. Are you sure you want to go nuclear on this? Sometimes it's better to just split things quietly. She's been cheating on me with her married boss for months. She made me feel like I was going crazy. She told me I'd regret leaving her. So no, I don't want to do this quietly. Okay then, bring me everything you have. I spent the weekend compiling evidence, photos, credit card statements showing charges at hotels and restaurants I'd never been to, text messages I'd managed to screenshot before Paige deleted them. It was like building a case against someone I'd once loved, and it felt both horrible and necessary. On Monday, I got an unexpected ally. Rebecca McKinley called me at work. Is this Trevor Hill? She asked. Yes. This is Rebecca McKinley, Owen's wife. I think we need to talk. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from both our workplaces. Rebecca looked exactly like I felt, tired, angry, and completely done with being lied to. How long have you known? She asked. About a week. You? I found hotel receipts in Owen's jacket pocket yesterday, the same dates your wife was supposedly working late. We compared notes. The timeline matched perfectly. While I was eating dinner alone, Rebecca was putting their kids to bed alone. While Paige was telling me about difficult clients, Owen was telling Rebecca about business trips that never happened. I'm filing for divorce, Rebecca said, and I'm going to make sure he loses everything. The house, the kids, his reputation, all of it. What about your kids? They'll be better off without a father who thinks marriage vows are just suggestions. She looked at me with something that might have been respect. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, but it's going to be spectacular. Rebecca smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. Good. They deserve whatever's coming to them. That afternoon, I got a call from Paige. She'd been staying at a hotel since I'd kicked her out, and she wanted to come get more of her things. Fine, I said, but I won't be there. Trevor, we really need to talk about this like adults. Adults don't cheat on their spouses. Adults don't lie for months and then act like the victim when they get caught. I made a mistake. You made a choice, multiple choices, every single day for 3 months. I hung up before she could respond. That evening, I went to my buddy Jake's house. He lived in a neighborhood that was somehow both gentrifying and falling apart at the same time, in a house he'd inherited from his grandmother. We sat on his back porch drinking beer and watching his neighbor try to fix a lawnmower that was clearly beyond repair. So what's the plan? Jake asked. I'm going to destroy them. Legally? Mostly. Jake laughed. You know, I never thought you had it in you. You always seemed too nice. I was too nice. That's why this happened. Nice guys don't just finish last. They get cheated on by their wives and then expected to be understanding about it. What changed? I thought about that for a moment. I realized that being nice and being good aren't the same thing. Sometimes being good means not being nice at all. The next day, I put the first part of my plan into motion. I called Paige's best friend, Sarah, and asked if we could meet for lunch. Sarah had been Paige's maid of honor at our wedding. She was one of those people who always seemed to know everyone's business, and she'd never particularly liked me. But she agreed to meet, probably because she was curious about what I wanted. I know you know about Owen, I said after we'd ordered our food. Sarah's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Come on, Sarah. Paige tells you everything. You probably helped her plan some of those hotel meetings. Even if that were true, it's none of your business. Actually, it's exactly my business. She's my wife. She's unhappy, Trevor. Has been for a long time. So unhappy that she couldn't even talk to me about it? So unhappy that she had to sneak around and lie instead of just asking for a divorce? Sarah shrugged. Some people aren't good at confrontation. But they're good at adultery? Look, I'm not saying what she did was right, but Owen makes her happy. Really happy. When's the last time you saw her smile like that? The question hit me harder than I'd expected because I knew the answer. I couldn't remember the last time Paige had looked at me the way she looked at Owen. But that didn't make what she'd done okay. So you think I should just accept it? Let her have her affair and pretend everything's fine? I think you should let her go. You two were never right for each other anyway. That stung, partly because it might have been true. Paige and I had gotten together in college when we were both different people. We'd grown up, but we'd grown in different directions. She wanted fancy restaurants and expensive vacations and a husband who wore suits to work. I wanted someone who could be happy with takeout pizza and camping trips and a husband who saved lives for a living. But none of that justified what she'd done. You're right, I told Sarah. We weren't right for each other. But she should have figured that out before she married me, not after she started screwing her boss. Sarah looked uncomfortable. What do you want from me, Trevor? I want you to give Paige a message. Tell her that if she wants to be with Owen so badly, she's going to have to deal with the consequences. Both of them are. What kind of consequences? I smiled, and Sarah actually leaned back in her chair. The kind that make good stories. 2 days later, I got the call I'd been expecting. Trevor, what the hell did you do? Paige sounded panicked, which was exactly the reaction I'd been hoping for. I'm going to need you to be more specific. Owen's wife knows. She's filing for divorce, and she's going to take everything. His kids, his house, half his money, everything. That's terrible, I said, not meaning it at all. You told her, didn't you? Actually, she figured it out on her own. Turns out Owen's not as smart as he thinks he is. Hotel receipts in his jacket pocket? Really? That's amateur hour. Trevor, please, you have to call her. Tell her it was all a misunderstanding. Why would I do that? Because if Owen loses everything, he won't be able to take care of me. The sheer audacity of that statement left me speechless for a moment. Even after everything, Paige still expected me to help her, to protect her relationship with the man she'd cheated on me with. Let me get this straight, I said finally. You want me to lie to Owen's wife so that your boyfriend can keep his money and continue supporting you? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Trevor, I know you're angry, but I'm not angry, Paige. I'm done. With you, with this conversation, with pretending that any of this is my problem. I hung up and immediately called David Chen. How's the divorce paperwork coming? I asked. Almost ready. But Trevor, I have to warn you about something. Paige hired a lawyer too, Mitchell Morrison. I knew that name. Morrison was expensive, the kind of lawyer who advertised on billboards and took cases he knew he could win. How can she afford Morrison? I'm guessing Owen's paying for it. That made sense. Owen had money, and he probably wanted this whole thing to go away as quietly as possible. A messy divorce would be bad for his reputation, especially if Rebecca was already taking him to the cleaners. What's Morrison's strategy? He's claiming that you were emotionally abusive, that Paige was afraid to ask for a divorce because of your temper. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. My temper? I've never even raised my voice at her. That's not how they're going to play it. Morrison's good at creating narratives. He's going to paint Paige as a victim who was driven into the arms of another man by her cruel, controlling husband. Can he make that stick? Not with the evidence we have, but he can make things expensive and complicated. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Paige's lawyer, about the story they were going to tell, about how I was going to be portrayed as some kind of monster while she got to be the poor, misunderstood victim. I'd spent 4 years being a good husband. I'd worked extra shifts to pay for the things she wanted. I'd supported her career, listened to her problems, tried to make her happy. And now I was going to be painted as an abuser because she couldn't keep her legs closed around her boss. The next morning, I decided it was time to escalate things. I called Owen's office and asked to speak with him. His secretary tried to brush me off, but I was persistent. Tell him it's Trevor Hill, I said. Tell him it's about his wife. Owen came on the line a minute later, trying to sound calm and professional. Trevor, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Owen. I know you've been screwing my wife. I don't think this is an appropriate conversation to have over the phone. You're right. Let's have it in person. Your office, 20 minutes. I don't think that's a good idea. I wasn't asking. Owen's office was on the 32nd floor of a glass tower downtown, the kind of building where everyone wore expensive suits and talked in hushed tones about quarterly projections. I felt out of place in my paramedic uniform, but I didn't care. Owen's secretary tried to stop me, but I walked right past her and into his corner office. He was sitting behind a desk that probably cost more than my car, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Trevor, please sit down. Let's discuss this rationally. I don't want to sit down. I want you to explain to me how a married man with 2 kids justifies destroying someone else's marriage. It's not that simple. Everyone keeps saying that, but it seems pretty simple to me. You saw something you wanted and you took it, regardless of who got hurt. Owen stood up, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. It didn't work. Paige came to me, Trevor. She was unhappy in her marriage. She needed someone who could appreciate her. So you decided to be her knight in shining armor? I decided to be there for her when her husband wasn't. Her husband was working 60-hour weeks to pay for the life she wanted. Money isn't everything, says the guy who drives a Tesla and owns a house in the Hamptons. Owen's face flushed. Look, I'm sorry this happened, but Paige and I, we have something real, something you obviously couldn't give her. You want to know what I couldn't give her? I couldn't give her the thrill of sneaking around. I couldn't give her the excitement of an affair. I couldn't give her someone else's husband to steal. That's not what this is about. Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're both just selfish people who wanted what they wanted and didn't care who they hurt to get it. Owen sat back down, looking tired. What do you want, Trevor? I want you to know that I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you and Paige are. Your wife, your kids, your co-workers, your clients, everyone. You can't do that. Watch me. I left Owen's office feeling better than I had in weeks. The look on his face, the fear in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed life was about to come crashing down. It was exactly what I'd been hoping for. But I was just getting started. The next phase of my plan required patience and precision. I spent a week gathering intelligence, learning everything I could about Owen's life and business. His consulting firm, McKinley and Associates, specialized in corporate restructuring. They helped companies fire people more efficiently, which seemed fitting given Owen's character. I discovered that Owen's biggest client was a family-owned manufacturing company called Hartwell Industries. The CEO, Margaret Hartwell, was a 70-year-old woman who'd built the company from nothing and had very strong opinions about family values and personal integrity. I also learned that Owen's consulting contract with Hartwell was up for renewal next month, a contract worth over $2 million annually. On Thursday morning, I called Margaret Hartwell's office. Mrs. Hartwell, my name is Trevor Hill. I have some information about Owen McKinley that I think you'd want to know before you renew his contract. What kind of information? The kind that might affect how you feel about having him represent your company. We met that afternoon at her office, a modest building that stood in stark contrast to Owen's glass tower. Margaret Hartwell was exactly what I'd expected. Sharp, no nonsense, and completely intolerant of bullshit. I showed her the photos I'd taken of Owen and Paige, the hotel receipts, the timeline of their affair. This man is destroying 2 marriages, I told her. He's lying to his wife, his children, and apparently his business partners. Is that really the kind of person you want representing Hartwell Industries? Margaret studied the evidence for a long time. Mr. Hill, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I have to ask, what do you get out of this? Justice, I said, and maybe a little satisfaction. She smiled. I can respect that. Owen McKinley always struck me as too smooth, too polished. I prefer people with a little more substance. So, you'll terminate his contract? I'll do better than that. I'll make sure everyone in our industry knows exactly why we terminated his contract. That evening, I got a call from Rebecca McKinley. Trevor, I don't know what you did, but Owen came home in a complete panic. He's been on the phone all day trying to save some client contract. Good, I said. How are the divorce proceedings going? Better than expected. My lawyer says Owen's so desperate to keep this quiet that he's willing to give me almost everything I asked for. Full custody, the house, most of his assets. And Paige? What about her? Owen's about to lose his biggest client, probably his business too. What's going to happen to her when he can't afford to keep her anymore? Rebecca was quiet for a moment. I guess she'll have to figure that out for herself. The next morning, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Owen, sounding desperate and defeated. Trevor, we need to talk. I thought we already did that. Please, I'm begging you. Call off whatever you're doing. I'm not doing anything illegal, Owen. I'm just making sure people know who you really are. You're destroying my life. No, you destroyed your life when you decided to sleep with my wife. I'm just making sure everyone else knows about it. What do you want? Money? I can pay you. I don't want your money, Owen. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything because of someone else's choices. Paige is going to leave me if I lose everything. Yeah, probably. Turns out she's not the kind of woman who sticks around when things get difficult. You might have figured that out if you'd paid attention to how easily she betrayed her marriage vows. Owen was crying now, actual tears, not the fake ones Paige had tried on me. Please, Trevor, I have kids. You should have thought about your kids before you started cheating on their mother. I hung up and immediately called David Chen. How's the divorce paperwork looking? Good news. Morrison called this morning. Paige wants to settle. What's she offering? She'll take half the house value and her car. No alimony, no ongoing financial support. Why the sudden change of heart? I'm guessing her sugar daddy isn't feeling so generous anymore. That afternoon, Paige called me herself. Trevor, can we please just end this? I'll sign whatever papers you want. What happened to fighting for half of everything? Things have changed. You mean Owen's not willing to pay for your lawyer anymore? Paige was quiet for a long moment. He's going through some business problems right now. I heard something about losing his biggest client. You did that, didn't you? I just provided some information to someone who needed to make an informed decision. You're destroying him, Trevor. He might lose his whole company. Good. How can you be so cruel? Cruel. Paige, you cheated on me for months. You lied to my face every single day. You made me feel like I was going crazy for thinking something was wrong. You tried to paint me as an abuser in court, and you have the nerve to call me cruel? That's different. How is it different? Because I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Every single day for 3 months you hurt me, and you didn't care enough to stop. I'm sorry, Trevor. I really am. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry Owen's losing his money. You're sorry your perfect little fantasy is falling apart, but you're not sorry you hurt me. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything, Paige. I want you to sign the divorce papers and disappear from my life forever. 2 days later, she did exactly that. 6 weeks after Paige signed the divorce papers, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, like she was hoping she could make it to the checkout line without having to have a conversation. Hi, Trevor. Sarah, how's Paige doing? She's adjusting. Where's she living now? She got an apartment on the east side, nothing fancy. That was code for the cheap part of town. I wasn't surprised. With Owen's business collapsing and his wife taking him for everything he had, there wasn't much left over for supporting a mistress. Is she still with Owen? Sarah looked even more uncomfortable. They're taking a break. A break? Owen's going through a difficult time right now. The divorce, losing his business, he needs space to figure things out. I almost felt sorry for Paige. Almost. She'd given up her marriage for a man who'd abandoned her the moment things got complicated. What about her job? She's looking for something new. The consulting firm let her go. Why? Officially? Budget cuts? Unofficially? Having an affair with your boss and then having it become public knowledge isn't great for your career prospects. I nodded. Well, tell her I said hello. Sarah looked at me suspiciously. That's it? No gloating? No, I told you so? What would be the point? She's already living with the consequences of her choices. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that I'd gotten everything I'd wanted. Paige and Owen had both lost their jobs, their relationships, and their reputations. Owen was facing bankruptcy and a nasty custody battle. Paige was alone, broke, and unemployed. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I mostly felt empty. The next week, I got an unexpected visitor at work. Rebecca McKinley showed up at the hospital during my lunch break, looking better than I'd seen her since this whole thing started. I wanted to thank you, she said. For what? For giving me the push I needed to leave Owen. For helping me realize that I deserved better. How are the kids handling it? Better than I expected. Kids are resilient, and honestly, Owen wasn't around much anyway. They're adjusting to the new normal. And you? I'm good. Really good. I forgot what it felt like to not have to worry about what lies I was being told or what secrets were being kept from me. Rebecca looked at me for a moment, like she was trying to decide whether to say something. Can I ask you something, Trevor? Sure. Do you regret it? What you did to Owen and Paige? I thought about that question for a long time. Did I regret destroying Owen's business? Did I regret exposing their affair to everyone who would listen? Did I regret making sure they both faced consequences for their actions? No, I said finally. I don't regret it. They made choices, and choices have consequences. I just made sure those consequences actually happened, even if it meant becoming someone you never thought you'd be. That was the question I'd been avoiding asking myself. Had I become someone different? Someone harder, more calculating, more willing to hurt people who hurt me? Yeah, I said. Even then. Rebecca nodded. Good. Sometimes the world needs people who are willing to make sure bad behavior gets punished. After she left, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about what she'd said, about what I'd become and whether I was okay with it. The old Trevor would have been horrified by what I'd done. The old Trevor believed in turning the other cheek, in being the bigger person, in taking the high road even when other people took the low road. But the old Trevor had also been a pushover, a man whose wife could cheat on him for months while he made excuses for her behavior and blamed himself for her unhappiness. I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't sure exactly who I was now, but I knew I was someone who wouldn't be taken advantage of again. Someone who understood that sometimes being good meant not being nice. Someone who knew that justice and revenge weren't always different things. 3 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Owen had filed for bankruptcy and moved back in with his parents. Paige had taken a job at a call center and was living in a studio apartment with a roommate. I felt nothing when I heard this news. No satisfaction, no pity, no regret. Just a kind of neutral acknowledgement that the story had reached its natural conclusion. They'd made their choices, and now they were living with them, just like I was living with mine. The difference was, I could sleep at night. 1 year later, I was a different person living a different life. I'd gotten a promotion at work, started dating a nurse named Kelly who actually seemed to enjoy my company, and bought a house in a better neighborhood. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I could finally afford it without someone else spending my money on hotel rooms and expensive dinners. I ran into Paige one more time, at a coffee shop downtown. She looked older, tired, like life had been harder on her than she'd expected. She was with a man I didn't recognize, someone who looked as worn down as she did. She saw me before I saw her, and for a moment I thought she might come over and try to start a conversation. Instead, she looked away and pretended she hadn't seen me. I was fine with that. As I was leaving, I heard her laugh at something her companion had said. It was a different laugh than the one I remembered, smaller somehow, less confident. Like she'd learned that happiness was something you had to be careful with, something that could be taken away. I walked to my car, thinking about the man I used to be and the man I'd become. About the choices that had led me here and the choices that would take me forward. I wasn't proud of everything I'd done, but I wasn't ashamed of it either. Sometimes good people have to do hard things. Sometimes justice looks a lot like revenge. And sometimes the only way to stop being a victim is to make sure the people who victimized you face real consequences for their actions. I'd learned that being nice and being good weren't the same thing. I'd learned that some people only understand consequences, not appeals to their better nature. And I'd learned that the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's making sure that people who make bad choices have to live with those choices. Paige and Owen had wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They'd wanted the excitement of an affair without any of the consequences. They'd wanted to hurt people without being hurt themselves. I'd simply made sure that wasn't possible. Some people might call that cruel. I called it justice. As I drove home to my new house and my new life, I realized that I was finally, genuinely happy. Not because I'd destroyed two people who'd wronged me, but because I'd learned to stand up for myself. Because I'd learned that my happiness mattered just as much as anyone else's. Because I'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be anyone's victim. The old Trevor would have spent years wondering what he'd done wrong, how he could have been a better husband, whether he deserved what happened to him. The new Trevor knew better. Some people are just selfish. Some people will take advantage of your kindness and mistake it for weakness. Some people will hurt you simply because they can. The trick is making sure they can't. I pulled into my driveway, looked at my house with its fresh paint and well-maintained lawn, and smiled. This was what winning looked like. Not revenge, exactly. Justice.